Hey, this is Mike from Minimal 3DP, and today I'm going to work on setting up my extrusion multiplier, and this is a per filament setting. Now I'm using both Ellis's print tuning guide as well as Orca Slicer, which is my slicer of choice. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. To start off, I'm on Ellis's print tuning guide and taking a look at his extrusion multiplier. And this is, in some slicers, particularly both Orca Slicer and Cura, they use the term flow interchangeably. Basically, this is how much filament is being pushed out and how it's flowing out of the nozzle. And if we take a look, there's a methodology here where Ellis is using basically a per part setting to set the flow different for each item he's printing. Unfortunately, this is not something that's in Orca Slicer, at least not a per item setting for the flow. Now, with that being said, what you can do is use the actual flow calibration in Orca Slicer. So that's what I'm going to proceed to do. So let's switch over and take a look. Before I begin, I just want to point out that doing the extrusion multiplier should be done after you calibrate your extruder and you do pressure advance. And I've done both of those in previous videos, which I'll link above. So in Orca Slicer, I'm just going to go up to calibrate and then flow rate. Now I have several different options here. I have a pass 1 and pass 2. Basically, that prints little shapes, and you do it twice. Or what's relatively new is the Yolo and Yolo Perfectionist version. Now, real quickly, I'm going to do the recommended version, and then we'll take a look at the Perfectionist version as well. And Yolo stands for you only look once. So rather than doing 2 passes, you just do 1 pass. So if I click on this, it creates these swaths down on the bed. And each of these swaths has different flow settings. And it's as simple as slicing the plate and then sending it to my printer. So I'm sending it to the printer, and then we'll take a look once that's finished. As you can see, this completed printing. And the best way to do this, and I used to do it just by rubbing my fingers across it, because more this is a look and feel type test. But in reading Ellis's site, he recommends looking for the surface that's basically the shiniest. Now, I've looked through all these, and I'll be honest, one particularly when it was on the printer that was the shiniest. And if I look at it closely, it's sort of the flattest, with the least ridge lines, is this 0.01. Now, as I mentioned, this is the you only look once test. So looking at this, I'm actually pretty pleased with it. It feels smooth, it looks smooth, and again, it's shiny. Now let's just compare this to, let me look one that's the most, maybe 5. You notice I can see the ridges and I can feel the ridges a lot more on this one than I can on 0.01. So I'm going to go with 0.01 as my value. Now this is actually really simple. So let me switch over to Orca Slicer. So once I'm in Orca Slicer, I just want to go to my filament and the value's right here, the flow ratio. And what I'm simply going to do is I either need to add or subtract my value to my current flow ratio. In my case, the value is 0.01, so I'm just going to add that 0.01 to this value. So now my new flow ratio is 0.97. Hit save, and I can continue. So that is the you only look once test. Now, just for the heck of it, I'm going to run the Perfectionist version next. Now let's just see what the difference is. So I'm going to hit calibration, flow rate, and Yolo Perfectionist version. Going to discard my values. And now we look. This actually has everything broken out. This goes to 3 decimal places. So I'm going to slice my plate and then send this to my printer. And we'll come back in a couple minutes and take a look at what it looks like. As you can see, I've left the Perfectionist version actually on the printer. I'm just looking at these. Here's 0. And looking at the shiniest and which one feels the smoothest, I'm trying to decide here which one looks the best. Maybe negative 0.025. Maybe. You know, I actually feel like 0, well, let's see. Maybe negative 0.005. So I think negative 0.005 feels just about the best. And so that's what I'm going to go with. So what I'm going to do is go back over to Orca Slicer and just make this change. So I'm back in Orca Slicer and I'm just going to go up to my filament, then go down to the flow ratio. And I said that I chose negative 0.005. So I'm just going to subtract this from this value. So this would be 6.5 then. So that's my new flow ratio. Now, people are going to say this isn't the best way to do this. But in reading both Ellis's work as well as looking at Orca Slicer, what I'm trying to do is not necessarily get the ideal flow from the standpoint of strength or internal properties. I'm trying to get what I believe looks the best. And for me, I felt like this gave me a pretty good model, and I really liked the look of it. So that's what I'm going to go with. Now, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is you got to remember, with 3D printing, it all comes down to what works for you. So when you have a chance, I'd go ahead and calculate the extrusion modifier. You want to do it for all your various filaments. Now, I'm typically doing it by brand or type. And then you set this in your slicer. And just remember, it's either extrusion multiplier or it's your flow ratio. So if you have any questions or comments, please post them below. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Have a good night. This is Mike again. If you're having trouble with your 3D printer, I'm putting a link in the video description of how you can schedule a 15-minute consult with me. I'm more than happy to sit down with you, see if we can figure out what the problem is, see if we can get your printer rolling. Also, if you would like to support the channel, I've enabled memberships. And so for a small monthly contribution, you can help support my work. Now, ideally, what I'm going to do is use any money, and same for the advertising I get for the channel. I'm going to use that to buy more 3D printers and more equipment and more technology that I could use here on the channel. If you have any questions or comments, please post below, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.